time to read, since it's the first one of the major additions to the ICAN case study reviewed study text. So today we'll be looking at chapter 9, ethics and the professional accountant. And instead of letting today go without looking at that debrief session, we have to conclude our lectures on time. Don't forget there are 13 chapters in the new study text. So we are currently on chapter 9, and we'll look at that class today, and hopefully we conclude, because we need to run fast. In the next class on Friday, hopefully, if our debrief session for November 2020 is ready, we would have it. If it's not, then we'll move to chapter 10. We must make sure we cover the study text. And don't forget, we are also covering November 2020, May 2025, and also the pilot question and pilot questions for case study. So those three debriefs should be able to fine-tune our technique. And when the pre-sync comes 2 weeks before the exams, we'll also look at the pre-sync. But then those three papers, we should be able to look at that to help us fine-tune our technique. So some of us have submitted our scripts for November 2020. And if you've not looked at that paper, please try working on it. You can go to my YouTube page, download all the reports on in the description section of all the past papers. I think I've done on my YouTube page over 10 past papers out of the 22 diets. I think I've done like 10, and the reports are there. So please download it, practice with it, and use it to also practice with the November 2020, May 2025, and pilot question and answer that was just released. You can use it to practice to help fine-tune your technique on the case study report. All right, so having said that, please, it's an engagement class. So if you have an issue with any slide, please go ahead and interject very freely. And you have any concerns, you have any observations, you have any contributions, please go ahead, interject freely, and let's share some thoughts together. All right, so we're looking at ethics and the professional accountant, which is chapter 9 of the new syllabus. By way of content or table of content, we'll be having the learning objectives, the learning outcomes. Then the first unit will be an introduction to ethics. We'll look at that second unit or the third unit, a professional approach to ethics, then ethics in professional life, determining whether an action is ethical, a structured approach, ethics shade of gray in opinions, and very importantly, the last unit will be ethics in the case study exams. Ethics in the case study exams, it's a requirement, not just a requirement, it's a prerequisite. If you don't identify ethical issues in the case study exams, it will be hard to pass case study. Why did I say it will be hard? Because the examiner is expressly very, very clear on integrating ethics in your case study exams. And don't forget, out of the 8 boxes structured for your write-up, ethics is in one of the box. Box number 5 is ethical issues. So you must talk about ethical issues for requirement 1 and requirement 2. So it will be hard to pass case study if you don't talk about ethical issues. So unit 8 or 9.8 you can see on the screen is very important. And as we practice those questions, don't forget ethical issues are very important. It will be challenging to pass case study if you don't talk about ethical issues, which we'll be looking at in this class today. Right, so our objective is to provide us with the knowledge of the importance of ethics to the professional accountant. Our profession is a noble one. We don't just behave like garage people. We don't behave unethically. We don't behave like some profession that don't have a framework guiding their actions and decisions. So our objective here is to make us understand the reasonable way accountants behave. It's very key. And by understanding how ethics forms or paves the way we behave in the working space, the outcome of this would propel us to explain, after understanding the ethical framework and concepts behind this chapter, we should be able to explain the place of ethics in our profession. We should also be able to explain the International Federation of Accountants pronouncement on ethics and ethical conduct for professional accountants. And we should also be able to understand how to determine ethical conducts and understand the place of ethics, most importantly in case study exams, and how to pass it. It's very important. So primarily, we should be able to understand how ethics is presented in the case study paper, primarily to pass, then secondarily to apply in our day-to-day life. All right, so let's look at this first introduction to ethics. Ethics are written codes and principles and also values governing decisions and actions within an organization. So we have written codes in our offices. We have most of the HR policies, and one of them is Code of Ethics, Code of Conduct. Mostly these are codes that define our values, that define the expectations of every staff, of every member. So it is with our profession globally. Accounting is a profession that has ethical codes written, and we also have unwritten codes that guide our profession, either by ICAN or by IFAC, the global body. ICAN is the local body, IFAC is the global body overseeing the actions of bodies like ICAN. Now, ethics in simple form are written codes that guide our decision, that helps us navigate how we behave in the accounting space. Very important. We also have the business ethics. Business ethics talking about actions of individuals and the organization as a whole is shaped by the organization's culture and those in power. So in doing business, ethics is very important. And one of the key additions in the new syllabus is ethical trust. Now, trust, T-R-U-S-T. Somebody has said that trust takes 1,000 years or 1,000 days to build, and it takes 1 second to lose. I think I agree with him, because your actions, once you lose trust in the sight of your clients, your employer, your business partners, then your credibility is lost. It's very important that business ethics guards our actions, and our actions are very important to be guarded by ethical conduct in the business space. So in conducting our business, our activities, ethics must be our guide. It must help us, it must shape our culture and help us to behave in a way that earns the trust of our business partners and our employers. Now that leads us to business trust. It talks about outsiders, what outsiders place in a business. Loss of trust is difficult to establish. Like I said, it takes 1,000 days to build, and it takes 1 second to lose. That's business trust. So outsiders and people that don't know us will trust us based on our actions, our conduct, our behavior professionally. And this is very important. And trust is earned. Trust is not it's not a gift. It's not conferred upon us. It is earned based on our actions and our behavior, our disposition towards activities, towards business dealings. This is key. So business trust is very important for accountants. And the elements of business ethics speaks to knowing right from wrong and choosing to do what is right. A wise man said, right is right, no matter who is not doing it, or no matter how many people are not doing it. And wrong is wrong, no matter how many people are doing it. So accountants should always do the right thing and always choose to ignore the wrong, refuse the wrong. So those are basic elements of ethics. And as a noble profession, we are susceptible to a lot of temptations around cutting corners, around compromise, around a lot of issues in the accounting space. And accountants occupy very sensitive positions, ranging from chief finance officer, ranging from chief risk officer, ranging from chief internal auditor, chief investigation officer, and several portfolios that accountants have requisite experiences. And this basic element of doing the right thing is very important as a foundation for our ethical behavior. So that's it about an introduction to ethics we'll be looking at. Next, you need to be looking at a professional approach to ethics. So please don't forget, if you have contributions, you have observations, you have some concerns, please feel free to interject or just raise your hand, and I'll stop to I'll halt to get your thoughts on this beautiful conversation we're having today. So let's look at a professional approach to ethics. And that looks at the accountancy profession and the principles that guard our behavior. And the International Ethics Standard Board of Accountants is a code. The IASB A code is a code that was promulgated by IFAC, a very detailed document, about 200 to 300 pages. You could download it online. And it guards how we behave and speaks to the responsibility in acting and the actions we exhibit in the public interest, which is very paramount, not solely to our employers or our clients, but the code speaks to being very responsible to the public. Everything we do must be public interest centric. It must be public interest centric and not personal interest centric. Our responsibility is to the public, secondarily, and I think primarily to our clients and employers. So the accounting profession is mostly principle-based. We have two based approaches to accounting: the rule-based approach that resonates with more of the rule-based jurisdiction, the US, South America, and those accounting areas, Canada, that apply the rule-based. But our jurisdiction, UK, and some other African nations, gravitates towards the principle-based accounting. And so this code, it's more aligned to our approach to accountants in this jurisdiction. And it speaks to compliance with codes. Every chartered accountant, every student, every member of ICAN must comply with this code. And there are laws and regulations prohibiting certain parts and actions of accountants. So we must comply significantly with some of these codes, mostly, even though some may need the application of our judgment, since we are in the principle-based jurisdiction. But we must comply significantly to some of these codes in ensuring that we are aligned with the global best practices of accounting in a whole, or as a whole. So the conceptual frameworks about some of the IASB code speaks to identifying threats to our fundamental principles. Some of these we are aware of. Some of the papers we've taken before the case study paper, right from maybe skills and those that maybe came from foundation, speaks to some of these principles, identifying threats to our fundamental principles, and also evaluating the significance of these threats, and also applying safeguards to eliminate or reduce threats to an acceptable and barest minimum. And also the professional judgment. Our professional judgment is crucial in applying our judgment to this framework. So we have the 5 fundamental principles that guide our behavior. Number 1 is integrity. We're all aware of it. Being straightforward, honest, and very, very, very straight in all professional and business relationships. So integrity is core, and it's the first principle that guides an accountant. And it has to do with not being associated with material false or misleading information, reckless statements, or misleading omissions in our reports. And everything we do as an output or producing outputs for the accountant or for the business of our clients. Integrity implies fair dealing, truthfulness, uncorrupted by self or personal interest or undue influence. So that's one of the fundamental principles that guides us as accountants. Number 2, we're all aware of this, but by way of recap and reminder: objectivity, not allowing bias, external influence, conflict of interest, undue influence from others, close or afar, to override our professional or business judgment. We must avoid relationships that compromise our objectivity and our judgment. Another one is professional competence and due care. Maintaining professional knowledge and skill at every required level. That's part of what we are doing. Some of us are on the call. Why? Because we want to qualify as chartered accountants. That's part of professional competence. You're building and upgrading to be competent in the business space. So being professional competent is maintained or maintaining professional knowledge, and that's very important for all accountants. You want to qualify, and once you qualify, that doesn't end your professional development. That's just passing exams. Your maintenance of professional competence is for life as a chartered accountant. You must maintain professional competence for life. And that is why everywhere you go for seminars, you go for webinars, you go for professional accounting conferences. We have the MCPE in ICAN, mandatory compulsory program of education, where you must achieve a particular number of units. I think last 2 years it was about 30 credit units. This year it's now 40 credit units. You must have structured learning platforms where you sit down and learn on structured platforms. You must have 25 credit, and for unstructured platforms you have 15 credits. So passing the exams of ICAN, that doesn't end your professional competence, and ensuring that you're updated with day-to-day promulgations, regulations in the accounting space. Passing exams is just one area. We finished national conference last week. Last week we just had the national conference, and that conference alone was for 3 days, I think for 5 days, and that's 25 credit units, and that costs money. You have to sit down, learn, unlearn, relearn, and that's about being professional competent. And that's why ICAN is among the leading, if not the most prestigious institution or professional institution in Africa, because they push and drive these current developments, ensuring that accountants are up to date. So don't finish your exams and say, finally, you are just starting. In the area of professional competence, you're just starting. So you need to, we need to be professionally competent, and that's generally for ICAN members. There's for your personal development to be able to be relevant in the business space. You need to drive yourself, push yourself to be able to exercise sound judgment in applying knowledge. That's the essence of professional competence and due care. By the time you're updated, passing the ICAN exams is just having certificates. Now, being a leader in the accounting field, it demands your own personal sacrifice, empowering yourself, learning every day to stay relevant in the accounting space. So we have two kinds of maintenance of professional competence. One is by attainment. Of course, some of us are on the call. You want to pass the ICAN exams. Once you pass it, which you will pass, of course, by God's grace, you pass. You've attained professional competence. The second one is maintenance. That's why I said passing it is just one thing. You begin to maintain that attainment year by year. And if you don't meet those credit units, there's a way it's going to affect you as an ICAN member. You have to meet those credit units year in, year out. And it helps you to be continually aware and understand what is happening in the accounting space on a day-to-day basis. So many accountants just have certificates, but they are not competent, they are not relevant. They can't satisfy their clients, they can't satisfy their employers. Why? Because they've not maintained this professional competence. So it's mandatory for accountants to understand professional competence has to be maintained on a year-to-year basis. And also your diligence, acting in accordance with assignments required very carefully, thoroughly, and timely. It's another way to be professionally competent and exercise due care. Also, confidentiality is one of the fundamental principles for accountants, ensuring that information you have, most accountants are privy to a lot of information that a lot of staffs don't have. The performance of a business, the position of the business, the cash flow of the business. You are privy to some of this information at several levels. So most of this information must be held in high esteem, confidentially. We're not allowed to disclose without due authority or without due authorization. And we must not use most of this information for personal interest or personal use or for a third party's advantage. So we need to consider interest of all parties in our confidentiality quest. We must substantiate all information and ensure that we must communicate to the owners of this information before disclosure. Or if it's by law, we are mandated by law, of course, to divulge some information. But aside being mandated by law or public courts requirements, accountants must be confidential in every information we come by due to the work we are doing. Also, professional behavior, it's another fundamental principle, and that speaks to compliance. We must comply with laws, regulations, and avoid actions that discredit the profession. laws and regulations talking about external compliance to laws and regulations of the land, taxes, environmental laws, whatever it is, we must comply. And also internal laws of an organization, policies, SOPs, and whatever it is that runs the organization, we must comply and avoid any action that discredits the accounting profession. Actions a reasonable third party would view negatively must be avoided by the accountant. So we must be honest and truthful in marketing and projecting the accounting profession to the public. We must avoid exaggerated claims. We must avoid disparaging comparisons. In the area of external audits and external auditing firms competing for jobs, we must avoid, and that's this slide speaking to audit firms, avoiding any disparaging marketing or disparaging other firms to get jobs. So shall speaks to indicating that the principles are absolute. That's the word shall in the study text that was used. Shall indicates these principles are absolute, and there are threats. While we have these principles, there are threats that will come to combat these principles, to fight them. And one of the threats is self-interest threats. It tries to fight our integrity, objectivity, and the way we behave in the public space. So financial or other interests inappropriately coming to the accountant as baits. They are baits to influence our judgment and behavior must be avoided. So self-interest threat are financial or other interests that are appealing to the accountant, and he must be very careful to avoid self-interest, personal interest in all his business dealings. We also have self-review threat, talking about inappropriate evaluation of results for previous business judgments and services relied upon for a current service. So self-review is like being the maker and the checker at the same time. An accountant must avoid such areas of having self-review threat. Also, we have advocacy threat, speaking to promoting a client's or his employer's position to the point of compromising his objectivity. So advocacy threat, for example, an external auditor going to stand for his client to secure a loan in a bank. That's advocacy threat and must be avoided. Familiarity threat, speaking to due or elongated long-term relationship that makes an accountant being very sympathetic or avoids some flaws of his client. It speaks to familiarity. And that's why, for example, an audit firm must have a particular duration period of auditing a client, because familiarity may come in, and sometimes 5 to 10 years is the duration, and he has to cede that job or engagement to another firm. So there are several examples of familiarity threat, and accountants must avoid any relationship, any closeness that would impair his objectivity through this threat. And finally, we have the intimidation threat, talking about acting objectively due to not acting objectively now, being deterred from acting objectively due to either fear or actual or perceived pressures. Being intimidated is the word to use. Being intimidated to act objectively, is a threat accountants must avoid, and some actions may demand accountants to resign from engagements, resign from jobs, resign from engagements that would cause this intimidation threat. All right, so that's it for the unit on professional approach to ethics. I know we're used to some of these concepts in previous papers, SBR, AAA, and some other past papers, just by way of recap. All right, so any questions? Any contributions to that short unit? Don't forget. Oh, okay. Yes, please. Your hands are up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, sir. And good evening, everyone on the call.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. Good evening. Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So my question is on the number of points that every accountant should meet up with that you mentioned earlier. I just want to know, what's the implication of not meeting up with their points?
All right, good question. And I'm glad you're asking it, because once you qualify, you begin to face such requirements. So it's good you begin to prepare. So currently it's 40 credits, 25 structured, 15 unstructured. So the implication is that if you don't meet that in a year, you have a 3-year window. So in 3 years, you should have 120 credits. So it is advised that for the first year you qualify, if you don't meet 40, say you have 30, then the second year you should have 50. So minimum you should have is 120 for 3 years. Now you have a 3-year window to complete 120. The implication is that if you don't complete it, there are penalties and there are dues. When it comes for you to, when it's time for you to be conferred with fellowship, you may not be conferred. That's moving from an associate to a fellowship or a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. Then there are some portfolios you may not be able to hold. You may not be able to stand for elections. You may not be able to get your audit license. If you're a member of a district, there are some posts you may not be able to hold, and so many other reprimands that and penalties that you'll be penalized if you don't meet that. They're just trying to tell you you're not professionally competent. If you cannot meet minimum of 40 credits a year, it shows that you're not serious and you're not ready to stay upgraded and relevant in the accounting space. So those are the implications. You may not be able to be voted or vote for during our there's this annual presidential voting rights and all that. They check these things to ensure that you're up to date. And you can also be voted for some of these things. If you're not up to date, you may not be voted for too. So there are many disadvantages, many things you will not be able to. Then there's the letter of standing. There's a letter of standing ICAN gives you if you need to provide to your employer. And if you don't meet these professional competence benchmarks, they may not be able to provide it to you. They'll check your platform. They will check your profile. On your profile, you have the updates and how many credits you have. So essentially, there are negative impact of not meeting this credit unit. So in advising you, please try to meet it. If I show you my MCPD for every year, minimum I do is 70, 80. You have a lot of platforms to learn from. There are free webinars. Some of them are very free. Some are paid. So it's just to monitor them, stay on platforms, and you get a lot of alerts on some of these webinars, some of these topics that resonate with you on risk, compliance, internal audits, finance, accounts, many trainings, Excel, so many of them. So it's just to stay abreast with the facts and keep learning. 1-2 hours a day, 1-2 hours a week, 1-2 hours a month will not take your time. And attending district meetings as a chartered accountant also adds to these credit hours. So in answering your question succinctly, yes, there are implications, and you don't like those negative implications. So don't go that route.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good question.
Yes.
All right. Any other question? Please bring them on if you have them, so we could clarify. Any questions? Thank you for that fantastic question. It's a good one. All right. So let's speak to the next unit on ethics in professional life. Ethics in professional life. As a chartered accountant, as members of our Noble Institute, we are all members. It's just that for now you're a student, and by November, some of us will qualify. You will join membership, full membership. But then our professional life speaks to developing and adhering to all our ethical approaches. Very important. So from writing exams, from reading, from behaving in your office, don't forget, even as a student, if you are reported to the institute that you did this, you did that in your office, you behaved unethically, you did, and if it is proven by the disciplinary committee, we have a disciplinary committee that is equivalent to the Court of Appeal in Nigeria. If they call you and you are judged guilty, then you face the wrath of ICAN. So the profession does not take it lightly with unethical practice. So as members, we must develop and adhere to our ethical approaches, an ethical code of conduct. We must be aware and address issues that come before us over time. And ethical issues are very subtle. They don't come crystal clear to us. They come in subtle ways to deviate us. And our work experiences provide us with opportunity to observe and practice ethical principles on our day-to-day work. And these ethical issues have dimensions in treating people, analyzing information, and for us to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. Also, our professional values developed through formal training we're having here and through informal discussions in our office help to shape our ethical values. So our ethical behavior pervades or permeates throughout our organizational life. Questionable behavior in one area may signal wider issues affecting other areas of our professional life. So we must be very careful in handling ethical issues pragmatically. And that's why ethics in professional life is key for an accountant. So we need to understand how to determine whether an action is ethical or unethical. And that's the next unit we'll be looking at. How do you determine whether an action is ethical or unethical? Number one is you need to consider the outcomes. When an ethical issue comes before you as an accountant, you ask, what will be the outcome of this? What is the result? The result should speak to the end, not the means. So what is the end of this ethical issue? What will it culminate in? So there is a structured 4-way test that is advised for accountant, and is a reflective process of understanding if an action is ethical or not. And the first one is the issue brought before you, or the issue before you, is it a truthful one? These are questions to ask. It's a reflective process. Ask yourself, is this a truthful case before me? And whatever the case is, if you provide your judgment on that, your judgment, will it be fair to everyone affected, whatever party it is, your client, your employer, your colleagues in the office, whatever decision you make, will it be fair to everyone? So the fairness test is very important to consider. The truthfulness test, the fairness test, the two ways to reflect on an ethical issue. Number 3, will it build goodwill for your organization? By the time you are, as an accountant, makes that decision on that ethical issue brought before you, will it bring goodwill or will it bring bad will? Let me use the word bad will. In class one day, I think it was account 402 in class in school, very humorous class. We're talking about goodwill. It was consolidation in school. I studied accounting in Ahmadu University. So I won't forget our lecturer asked, what's the opposite of goodwill? And nobody could answer. So I raised my hand and I knew the answer, but then I answered bad will, and everybody busted into laughter. I was like, bad will. That was a consolidation question. So, we just used that to laugh. But then he told us that, I won't forget, goodwill, the opposite is capital reserve. So we know that when you have capital reserve, it's the opposite of goodwill on consolidated financial statements. So just a humorous interjection to help us understand that, will it bring goodwill, your decision, will it bring goodwill to the organization, whatever it is you're ethically presented with? And the fourth test is it beneficial for all vested interest? That decision, that ethical issue you're about to decide on, provide your judgment on, will it be beneficial to all vested parties and vested interests? So if it is yes, based on these reflective 4 questions you've asked, then it suggests that you've made an ethical decision. And if it is no, then you've determined the action is unethical. So it's very important also to understand that the publicity test, whatever ethical issue is brought before us, you need to consider your reaction and also your decision, your action. If your action and your behavior is published on the dailies, on the news, on TV, on social media, how will the public react to it? So an unwillingness to publicize may indicate ethical dilemma. When a company cannot publicize whatever action it's engaging in or a decision is making publicly, then it has commercial sensitivity. That means that action is unethical. So these are questions to ask to be able to determine if our actions as accountants or as an organization are ethical or not. So we have to put it to publicity test, put it to the truth test, fairness test, goodwill test, and benefits test to see if they will stand the test of time. So that's it in understanding whether an action is ethical or not. All right, so we are running. Let's look at the structured approach to ethics in professional life, the structured approach. Logically and structurally, we need to approach ethics in understanding how to navigate them in our business endeavors. So in our workplace, we'll be approached with some of these issues. So there's a structured approach on how to address them as chartered accountants. Number one is to gather relevant facts and identify the problem. What's the problem? What's the ethical issue before us? So as accountants, we are mostly on some committees. We are mostly on some we are mostly HODs in the department. So we are faced with some of these issues on a day-to-day basis. So the first thing is to gather relevant facts about the case, about the ethical issue. That is identifying the problem. Number two is identify the affected parties in that case. Who are those affected? Who are those bedeviled by the ethical issue before you? And number three is to identify the ethical issue involved. Having identified the parties, what is the ethical issue involved? Is it theft? Is it stealing? Is it fighting? Whatever it is it fraud? So you need to identify the ethical issue involved. And number four is consider and evaluate alternative actions and consequences of the issue that was presented to you. What was the action? What was the impact? What was the effect? Consider that. Then, having considered the impact and effect, the actions and consequences, you need to decide on the course of action to take. So that's the five structured approach advised for you to be able to understand how to navigate ethical issues in the workplace. So we have the next unit speaking to ethics shade of gray in opinions. For accountants, you have to be very tactful when dealing with ethical issues. You have to be smart, you have to be wise, you have to be very, very pragmatic in handling ethical issues because they come before us as accountants. The origin of questionable issues around willful, negligent, and accidental behavior can be debatable because when it comes to ethical issues, there are some shades of gray. Shades of gray talks about unclear areas. So some of our actions as accountants, the effect may be the same. So for example, somebody makes mistake to post 200 million wrongly and it affects the organization. And another person makes the same mistake to defraud the organization of 200 million. It's the same effect. And that's talking about the origin of questionable issue. You could say somebody made a mistake of 200 million and it cost the organization. And somebody defrauded the same organization of 200 million, it still cost the organization. Two different motives, but the same effect. You made a mistake, the organization lost 200 million. Or you stole 200 million or defrauded the organization of 2 million. It's the same. It's the accident I don't understand. I don't know how somebody will make a cost the organization or have an accident of 200 million, for example. So I know willful could be an ethical area somebody could cost by error, let's say, cost his organization money or his negligence. But by accident, I doubt if accident could be a reason why an accountant will cost his employer money. So it's very important to take note of this, that no matter what it is, the organization loses money or loses as a result of the actions, negative actions of accountants. So we have to be very careful with some of these areas and ensure that we are adequately prepared. So I don't know is not a reason, or I didn't know as an accountant. You have to know. You have to be very careful, and that's why professional competence and due care is key. So also whether a clear ethical issue exists can be a matter of opinion. It can be clear or unclear. So we need to assess carefully and considering our cultural, national, and religious differences, especially in a country like Nigeria, where we've been seriously divided along religious lines, religious lines, cultural lines, and we have these differences. So as accountants, you have to be pragmatic, you have to be smart, and very careful in handling matters in your office very pragmatically. So these shades of gray and opinions, accountants have to navigate them very carefully in the business space. All right, so let's look at ethics in the case study exam. This is very important. How do you handle ethics in the case study exam? So we've looked at all the theoretical aspects briefly of what ethics is about, fundamental principles, ethical threats. Yeah, so now we're coming primarily, this is why we are in this class, to be able to understand how to pass ethics in the case study exams. Like I said, if you don't discuss ethical issues in the case study exams, you may not be able to pass case study. It's very expressly clear in the examiner's instruction. And don't forget, one of the boxes in the case study exams speaks to ethical issues. You need to discuss ethical issues for requirement 1 and requirement 2. It's clear. So it will be hard to pass case study if you don't talk about ethical issues, because out of the 8 boxes, that's the only requirement aside conclusions and recommendations. You must talk about ethical issues. It's a must. So please pay attention to this unit or this section, and I think this should be the last session for this chapter. Ethics in the case study exam. So how is it presented in the case study exams? There are practical steps for ethical dilemmas in the case study exam, There are practical dilemmas, and they are always presented. It's just that there is no express requirement on ethical issues. You don't have a requirement, and they say discuss only ethical issues in requirement 1 or requirement 2. It's not presented that way. It's presented in a way you must be able to identify ethical issues in the exams. So the examiners of case study assess how candidates assemble answers to ethical issues within the case or scenario provided to you. So examiners look at it, and in one of the boxes, ethical issues is box number 5. So if you've been going through the reports, if you have been going through my reports on YouTube, my lectures, my debrief sessions on past questions, you see that every report has an ethical issue, whether requirement 1 or 2 discussion, there must be ethical issue. So that's what examiners ask you. And in the requirements, the foreseen, the unseen, it's expressly clear. If you don't discuss ethical issues, then you stand a very low chance of passing case study. Very low chance. So the provision of ethical issues help professionals in real life, secondarily, and also in the exams practically. So in practice, you are supported, or the support is sought from your hierarchy, the hierarchy of your professional bodies in ICAN. In real life, it is advised that once you qualify, you should join a district. A district is a close community of chartered accountants near you. We have them. If you stay in Lagos, you have so many districts in Lagos. If you stay in Abuja, you have so many. In Kano, I belong to Kano and district. We have 2 districts in Kano. So every state, in Nigeria mostly, we have several districts. So it's good to join such districts after you qualify. And once you qualify, the joining of these districts helps to boost your connectivity with other professionals. You see, one thing is, a wise man said, your network determines your net worth. In these gatherings of chartered accountants, you get opportunities, you get to network, you get to learn, you get to unlearn, you get to relearn, you share ideas, you share your little mind with greater minds, and you draw a lot of value from minds and other chartered accountants in that community. So the district is very important, and in practice that helps you to get advice. That helps you to be able to navigate ethical issues. You get advice, you share experiences. But in the exams, you must be able to analyze ethical issues by yourself. You cannot get advice from anybody. You need to resolve ethical issues by yourself, and that's the essence of practice. Practicing with past papers will help you be able to identify ethical issues and how to pen down ethical issues, share your thoughts clearly and comprehensively for examiners to give you your marks very seamlessly. So in exams, you must analyze and resolve ethical issues by yourself. But in life, you can get it from your professional body and from your network of professionals around you. So simply stating to pass it up the line is an appropriate answer in case study. You can't pass it up the line in writing ethical issues now. You have to navigate it. You have to crunch it by yourself on the day of the exam. And it will be very terrible for you to go to the exam day without understanding the ethical issues. It will be very terrible. It will be very, very finding the right word now. It will be challenging. Let me use challenge. It will be challenging to not understand ethical issues on the day of the exam and going to write that paper, then you're going to have a problem. So please understand ethical issues from this context and be able to identify them by practice will help you navigate it. So in the exams, you need to crack it. You need to understand ethical concerns. You need to understand the concerns and the impact on a business and how to share those thoughts and how to help the organization or your client, the scenario, to provide solution to those ethical issues. So examiners expect in the case study exams you to demonstrate professional knowledge in tackling ethical issues, and you should be able to assess mainly or you'll be assessed by the examiners mainly on identifying ethical issues, explaining ethical issues, and applying your judgment to these ethical issues. So like I said, there's a box number 5. It's the box for ethical issues. So you need to discuss box number 5, ethical issues. You need to identify them first. You need to explain them and apply your judgment on the ethical issues. And also ethical issues form a significant part of the total marks of the exams. I think it's about 20 marks. So to address them seriously, or not to address them, or failure to address them seriously jeopardizes your success. This is from the study text now, even though I summarized what the study text said on ethical issues. You have very challenging, it will be challenging to pass case study without identifying ethical issues. So you must address ethical issues very, very clearly. So ethical requirements in the case study are not usually requirement 1 or 2. They are embedded in such requirements. So, for example, you need to discuss operations and strategy, and ethical issues may actually cover areas of lack of professional independence or objectivity of accountants. These are ethical issues. It may be presented with a scenario where an accountant is not objective, has issue of maybe taking bribes, being fraudulent, producing cosmetic reports, window dressing accounts. So those are ethical issues, and when you read them, you should be able to point out that these are ethical issues. Areas of conflict of interest among stakeholders are examples of conflict ethical issues that will be presented to you in the case study exams. Doubtful accounting or commercial practice are another example. Inappropriate pressure to achieve a result, inflating numbers, cosmetic reporting. These are examples of ethical issues. So usually business ethic issues around the organization you are studying's dilemma, rather than professional ethics, speaks to your advisory role as the case study candidate. So you need to consider the audience also. So for example, you are writing to the board with different interests when giving advice, or you're writing to a boss. We have the external report, we have the internal report for case study. So you should know the language and tone to address the board, who have different members, and they want to address your boss, which is an internal report, in giving advice. So the 4 categories you could look at of ethical issues around lack of professional independence speaks to advising not in their best interest. These are areas of ethical issues you could find. Advising not in the best interest of the organization, that is personal interest, or not in the public interest. Abusing confidentiality are issues of ethical issues you could identify in a case. Compromising secondment work, working outside your expertise, mostly for audit firms, because it's required for auditors not to compromise secondment. You're not to work outside your expertise. If you don't have the requisite experience and expertise to carry your job, you can't do that. So when an accountant does a job he doesn't have experience, it's simply an ethical issue. So lack of professional independence is an area you could point out for ethical issues. So you could likely, some of these are in the order of significance and materiality in the exams. Another area is conflict of interest among stakeholders. It's talking about cartels, contradicting environmental and social reports. We just looked at sustainability. Any action an organization takes that is not sustainable are ethical issues. Undisclosed related party transactions. Mostly these are areas where top management and the board members or board members of an organization hide fraud. You could pinpoint them out in the case study scenario presented to you. Also, performance-related pay, abuse of contracts by top management. These are areas of these are areas of ethics you could point out in accounting or in the case study exams. We also have doubtful accounting or commercial practices where you have aggressive supplier attitude, unfair contract terms entered by management and those charged with governance, health and safety failings of an organization, abuse of customer information, talking about confidentiality, misuse of intelligence, copyright, misleading advertisement. These are all ethical issues that could point to an organization doing negatively in this area. Another area is inappropriate pressure to achieve a reported result. Talking about manipulation of key performance indicators, manipulating performance reports, position reports, just to report a favorable position of the organization, misclassification of covenants, talking about loans and maybe preference shares, misclassification of them, questionable bad debt policy, issues around expected credit loss, IFRS 9 model that are not applied appropriately, abuse of cutoffs, biased forecasts for loans. These are areas of ethics that could be presented to you. So the categorization is not rigid. These are examples of possible areas. There are others. So identifying these ethical concerns as chartered accountants, some are obvious, while some are subtle. So in your assessment and opinion, you need to identify them and explain them in the context of the case. Some of them are not always clearly marked, so you need that eagle eye to be able to point them out clearly. So the responsibility is on you to read the case with the aim of picking out and noting potential ethical issues. Very important. That's the responsibility you have on the case study. You need to pick. So from the precinct, for example, once you see management accounts provided to you in the precinct, you already have one ethical issue. You already know that the management accounts are not audited. So that's one ethical issue before even the unseen comes. Once you see management accounts, 3-year management accounts, you just know you have an ethical issue that the account have not been audited by an audit firm. A second a review party have not reviewed that management account. So that's an eye for details when you're looking at documents around the case study paper. You also need to address specific requests to consider ethical dimensions of a problem in the ethics parameter of the exams. So you need to recognize linkages and contradictions between exhibits. Don't forget you'll be presented with exhibits as much as 1 to 12, 1 to 13, depending on the full range the examiner is providing. The precinct always comes mostly, maybe exhibit 1 to 5 or 6 comes with the precinct. Then for the unseen, maybe from 6 to 12, 6 to 13, depending on the length and volume of the unseen. So generally you have a lot of exhibits, so you need to understand the linkages between both of them. And you also need to include ethical analysis only where relevant to the requirement. So you have a box, like I said. Box 5 is where you discuss ethical issues. So you need to avoid generic and platitudinous answers, talking about sporadic answers that are not direct on ethical issues. And that is why a separate header must be provided. And that box must discuss only ethical issues. So you can't discuss ethical issues maybe where you're talking about general overview, or you're talking about performance analysis, or you're looking at trend analysis, or you're looking at issues and options. You cannot discuss ethical issue. You need to avoid generic speaking or generic provision of ethical issues in your exams. You have to talk about it separately under a separate header. Very, very important. And you also need to approach ethical issues with the same attention and detail to other boxes, like you're doing financial statement analysis or financial data analysis. Ethical issues should have the same attention, the same content, and the same number. Don't forget you have 4 parameters to be tested on. We'll be looking at that in one of the topics. I think chapter 11 talks about the assessment procedure. We'll be looking at how to assess you. The assessment procedure provides 5 headers, 5 achievements. So under ethical issues, you'll be able to discuss 4 key points or paragraphs. And if you discuss 4 key points, you have superior achievement. If you discuss 3, you have competent achievement. If you discuss 2, you have below competent achievement. If you discuss only 1, you have no competent achievement. And if you discuss no point on ethical issues, you have void. So there are 5 assessment procedure in assessing you. So you're talking about ethical issues. For requirement 1, you should at least discuss 4 different ethical issues or aspects. And the same for requirement 2, you should discuss 4 ethical issues for that same box. So you have 8 ethical issues, 4 for requirement 1, 4 for requirement 2. We'll be looking at that graphically when we come to assessment procedure or writing a professional report, which is the next chapter. Also, applying diplomatic professional judgment and avoiding black and white thinking is very important in speaking to ethical issues. You need to avoid diplomatic professional judgment, talking about what is not in the case. You have to talk ethical issue directly with what is in the case. And avoiding black and white thinking speaks to pragmatically providing a negative context of the case. So you need to be you need to be very direct. Speak to what was provided to you in the case, and that will help you to identify ethical issues very, very clearly. All right, so that will be the end of ethics in the case study exams. It's good to understand the concept and how we'll be able to put it into practice when it comes to the main exams or in practicing one of the questions. So when we're practicing a question, we'll see how to, even though we've practiced 2 questions, we've seen how to provide it, but some of us, the benefit of some of us that are joining the class, the questions we'll be practicing, we'll be looking at how to navigate the ethical issue discussion very pragmatically. All right, so that will be the end, and it's also 9 o'clock.